Hello, everybody. This is Subhan Tai with CalOES, and thank you for joining today's webinar. The point of today's webinar is to quickly go over a great opportunity that is provided by the Fire Services Training Institute as part of the Listos California Emergency Preparedness Campaign. This webinar will be recorded and sent out to CERT programs, so if people miss this webinar, they can catch up to it. Or if you need to share this with other members of your program, you can do so. Really quickly, I want to talk about the Listos California campaign for those of you who have not heard about it. This is a $50 million preparedness campaign, part of AB 72 that started, got approved around March of last year. And we rolled out $50 million worth of grants throughout the state of California, $8 million of which was reserved for the CERT program. And you'll see that the grants were split up into two parts. Half of the grants were administered by CalOES, and half were administered by California volunteers. Shortly after the grants were all encumbered around July, we actually moved a team at CalOES that were responsible for the programmatic portion of the grant, including myself and Sharon Leon, to CalOES and created a unit within CalOES specifically to help manage this grant. And California volunteers still continue to manage the fiscal side. And all the CERT programs that have grants are from California volunteers, and they are working with with Caitlin to manage the fiscal side and with us to manage the programmatic side. And you'll see on the slide the kind of breakdown for the dollars that were given out of the $50 million. And $3 million also was given out to the Listos program, which many CERT programs are familiar with. Next slide, please. So for the $8 million that were allocated to the CERT program, the goal was to outfit 1,200 CERT volunteers with PPE, personal protection equipment, as well as providing funding for background checks and liability coverage for preparedness events. And there were two things that we sold the governor's office on for providing CERT support. There are 400 programs in the state of California. However, there is a disparity between the programs in terms of how equipped they are and how ready they are to respond locally as a resource for disaster preparedness and disaster response. So we said that in order for all 400 CERT programs to be viable, we have to provide grant funding that allowed for the purchase of protective equipment as well as equipment and supplies, but also for background checks, because a lot of times when you deploy volunteers, there's going to be a request that the volunteers be background checked if they interact with vulnerable populations or have access to sensitive information. The campaign also had a goal of engaging Californians in preparedness, and we knew that while CERT programs can definitely leverage their CERT volunteers to do so, we wanted to make sure that CERT programs could cover their volunteers in case they get injured during such an event. And we all know that the Disaster Service Worker Volunteer Program in the state of California does not cover preparedness events. If you are using the DSWVP to cover your volunteers during preparedness events, you are doing it wrong. And we will be having a webinar coming up soon that kind of goes over that and clarifies that. And Don Glusert, who took over for Anita Chant and runs the program now, will be giving that webinar. But if you have any questions about whether or not you're running the DSWVP correctly, please email me, and I will connect you with Don, and we can make sure to answer your questions so you don't have to wait for the webinar. That's very important. With the $8 million in grant funding for the CERT program, the responsibility was to engage approximately 400,000 Californians in preparedness. Roughly about 100 CERT programs got direct funding as the grantees and got little mini grants to provide engagement activities and also equip their volunteers with PPE, background checks, and liability coverage. What we found was that due to the short turnaround for the grant period or grant application period, as well as many programs having never done a grant before, just were not set up to be able to receive a grant. As we all know, grants are reimbursement-based, so you basically have to be able to spend money and then reimburse it, which many programs did not have the ability to do. So there was some leftover money, and we wanted to make sure that that leftover money wasn't just left on the table. So we did float a new grant out to provide support for state CERT programs and be able to allocate the rest of the money to that effect. The Fire Services Training Institute, which also received a grant to administer the Listos programs statewide, won the grant for the CERT support statewide. Today, we'll be talking a little bit about a project they want to roll out to utilize a large chunk of this money to support CERT programs in exchange for engagements. As you see here, of the $8 million, there were 400,000 engagements required. And with $3.8 million that's awarded to FSTI, roughly half, they have a responsibility for getting roughly half of the engagement. So you'll be able to participate in this opportunity by providing activities that will engage Californians and earn a value toward equipment and supplies, so that you can help fulfill the grant, but also get support for your program. Next slide. Really quickly, with the goal of 1 million Californians engaged with this $50 million campaign, to date, as of this week, we are at 906,000 people engaged, which is a large feat given COVID-19. During COVID-19, we also pivoted the campaign and allowed many of our grantees to also use grant dollars to provide COVID-19 education outreach. And this was a direct request from the governor's office. They had a huge concern that not enough information was going out, and they basically gave approval for grantees to leverage some of their funding to this. And if you're thinking, well, doesn't COVID-19 typically fall under preparedness anyway? The way this grant was created and the way the funding was allocated, it was allocated for disaster activities and disaster response. And unfortunately, it meant natural disasters. And COVID-19, being a pandemic, did not fall under the bucket of natural disasters. So doing regular COVID-19 did not fulfill the grant requirements of 1 million people reached in total, but it gave us the extra effect of reaching over a quarter of Californians with COVID-19 education. This includes directing people to the website that CDPH puts up and the governor's office puts up to get information. It includes giving them valuable information about how to make sure that they do not contract the disease and also infect other people with the disease if they're infected. It talks about safety. It talks about social guidance. It talks about updating on governor's messaging and everything. So this is a huge win for Californians, but it reached this many people using the current campaign that's already out there. With the campaign, we also made a concerted effort to look at the preparedness materials that are already currently in existence and seeing whether or not they're viable for people that we're trying to reach, the vulnerable population, the population that already isn't connected to regular emergency management and is not already in the communication channel, right? If you are already getting information, signing up for alerts, you already know what to do during a disaster. You already know what the materials are out there. You're already ready to consume, but that's a small population in California. There are many populations in California that do not have access to that, have no idea where to go to get information locally about the alert system or evacuation routes or what to do during a disaster. Many members in California do not even have a good command of the English language that is used for a lot of these materials, right? A lot of these materials are written at a college level with words that are not familiar to part of the California demographic. So with the Lisos California campaign, we made a concerted effort to look at and survey these demographics and ask them, hey, what is working for you and what isn't working for you? How can we reach your population and your stakeholders? We also created a lot of materials. So instead of taking something off the shelf that was created 10 years ago without all these considerations, we took all these considerations and then recreated materials, made them more like infographics, made it a lot more accessible, and also made it a point to make sure that all the materials were available in at least the top 6 languages spoken in the state of California, which is on the screen: English, Spanish, Mandarin, Tagalog, Korean, Vietnamese, and we also added Hmong. We also, in some areas, made some translations for materials specific to the population and allowed our grantees to do so as well. So if a grantee says, hey, we have a huge Armenian population in our area too, while the campaign as a whole would not translate everything, we allow for that local grantee to utilize their funding to either translate these California materials or their own materials and make it available. So they have the flexibility to reach all their vulnerable populations. We also had a lot of reports. So we created a vulnerable populations report and disaster sensitivity report in all counties. So every single county had an assessment of what kind of disasters they're vulnerable to, and also the breakdown of the vulnerable demographic. And that way our grantees have more information and know, hey, who do we need to reach out to? Who have we not reached out to? And then what's the makeup in our county, so that it could be a targeted approach as opposed to a generic approach statewide. We have launched a lisoscalifornia.org website that had a lot of information about the campaign, which was recently refreshed. And if you go to that website, you'll actually see a lot more videos, a lot more training, a lot more information that's been updated with stuff that we've created for the campaign, but also stuff that has evolved as we have learned working with these stakeholders on how to reach the population. You can actually send out that link to your stakeholders, and there's a 20-minute training that they can get online on this being disaster ready. That's nice and interactive, and it's subtitled in multiple languages. We also have a texting campaign. So in some counties, you'll see some billboards, you'll see some bus signs that tells people to text to a certain number, and they'll get information about being preparedness. We have a partnership with Nextdoor, and Nextdoor is a social media platform that's really neighbor to neighbor. It's designed for you within your neighborhood that's clearly defined to be able to reach out to your neighbors and talk about what's going on locally, and also make sure that they're aware of any criminal activity or any events that are coming up. And Nextdoor has long allowed for local fire departments and local police departments to have a identified account. So that way, when you're pushing information out from the fire department, it can be trusted, right? We all know that on social media, a lot of times people try to imitate authority and tell you information and try to stay tuned to some things. But Nextdoor was smart to that, and they actually created a special visual things and special designations for these kind of organizations. And they have created something for Cal OS at a state level to push information for Lisa's California out. And so the texting campaign is pushed out, our website is pushed out, so we get more eyeballs on this. One thing that the Lisa's California campaign was very cognizant of was you can create all the best materials in the world, but if people don't know about it, then it's useless. It's just on the shelf, right? There's a lot of agencies that create all these emergency plans that's on the shelf and never looked at again until 5 years later when they have to look at it again. We did not want that to happen with the Lisa's California campaign, so we spent a lot of dollars with marketing and hired professionals to make sure that we reach the people on the ground. That's why you see all these advertisements. That's why it costs you $4 million for a 30-second clip during the Super Bowl, because they know that you can offer all the discounts in the world, but if people don't know about it, no one's buying your product. So we want to make sure we have that too and make all these kind of partnerships with these partners. We also, because of the Lisa's California campaign, was able to push a lot of the CERT program forward, right? While the creation of the National Association was already going to be there, a lot of the projects that the NCAA is able to work on is due to the fact that we were able to leverage Lisa's California campaign to spearhead it in California, which the rest of the U.S. is able to benefit from, which FEMA is able to take and spread nationwide. Right? We're able to leverage and support the hybrid CERT training and also make additions, including making it available in Mandarin, including adding additional feedback to update the Spanish translation to make it a little more accessible to that population. We also were able to do online training for the CERT trainer and program manager course because of a push for the need in California due to Lisa's California campaign. The great thing about the campaign also is because it is a governor's campaign, CERT programs are getting a lot more recognition. We're getting a lot more jurisdictions interested in CERT. We're getting a lot more calls about leveraging CERT during disasters that we never got before, because now it's more of a trusted resource. People have been hearing about it a lot more. Elected officials are hearing about it a lot more. When they hear CERT, they say, oh, it's part of the governor's thing. Great, what is that? Where before they're like, no, we don't want to deal with volunteers. And that's the great thing about this campaign. So I'll turn it back over to Gustavo, and I'll be here to answer questions throughout the webinar. Great.
Thank you, Suva, very much. We're going to turn it now over to Mike Williams and Barbara Anderson from Fire Services Training Institute.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for taking the time to join us today. Mike Williams is our Executive Director at Fire Services Training Institute, and I serve as Vice President. I'm also the Chief Operating Officer of Aware and Prepare. So we just wanted to take 2 minutes to tell you who we are before we get into how you can apply for and get equipment and supplies for your CERT programs. So the Fire Services Training Institute is a nonprofit based in Santa Barbara and has operated throughout the state of California for over a decade. It began with a focus on preparing and equipping the volunteer fire service with uniform training, including improved communications and standards and practices. It has since evolved to include all community members that want to educate and prepare themselves and their families for emergencies and disasters. So FSTI was a partner of what we called the Aware and Prepare initiative back in 2008 when we launched, under the support and leadership of the Orfalea Foundation, which is a philanthropic institution located in our region. And the purpose of Aware and Prepare was to strengthen emergency readiness in Santa Barbara County. So when the Orfalea Foundation, much like other philanthropic organizations, transitioned their initiative work What we really tried to do in terms of a concerted effort to sustain programs was transition a lot of that programmatic work to key partners like FSTI. So in 2016, FSTI took in Aware and Prepare and Alert Are You Preparer, and they became formalized entities within the FSTI family. So this has really helped share our programs and given us the capacity to work with communities throughout the state of California. Many of you are aware of the LISTOS program that was developed in Santa Barbara as part of Aware and Prepare. And it really was the result of community leaders coming together and identifying the gaps that exist in language and cultural accessibility of emergency preparedness education and information. Now there are 53 registered programs statewide with over 300 active instructors, and really was in partnership and an inspiration for the LISTOS campaign. So we're just thrilled that there is a level of understanding and commitment with the state of California to make emergency preparedness training and information and education more accessible to all of our communities throughout the state. And Aware and Prepare has also always been invested in sustaining and building CERT programs. And we recognize the deep commitment and many passionate volunteers that keep these programs alive and thriving despite having few, if any, financial resources. So we are thrilled to be able to provide equipment and supplies to CERT programs throughout the state as part of the LISTOS campaign, and continue to reach individuals in disaster preparedness training and education in partnership with all of you. So as Suva mentioned, we are the administrator for both the statewide LISTOS program as well as the CERT program. And what we've really tried to do, and hopefully we'll show you today, is try to make this process as simple as possible. We definitely know, and I know all of you know, about cumbersome grant applications and reporting requirements. And so it really is our goal to keep things as clear and concise as possible. So with that said, I'm pleased to introduce our colleague, Brian Woodbeck, that will walk you through our application process.
Thank you, Barbara. Brian Woodbeck, I'm the administrator for the grant that we received to provide support to your programs. I wanted to go over the application process. I see a few of you have already applied. The actual website opened up Monday, so we're ready to go. So a quick overview, there's 2 forms that have been implemented. For you folks, the application is for the sub-award. That we actually have the grant, so don't get confused with the wording, and we're clearing that up, but FSTI, as you know, got the grant. You folks are just applying for equipment. We're responsible for the reporting part of the grant, not you. All you're responsible for is the engagements and putting those into merit and the application process. But you're not the grantee, so don't worry about going through a whole grant award process. So I want to make that clear. The equipment vendor is in the same process. So all the equipment you saw, Savat sent the equipment list out. That was a draft list. We've gone out to get quotes for that, out to get bids, and the bidders are using the same platform, except theirs is where they can put in their quotes for the equipment. You must register to access either form, so whether you're a vendor or you're an applicant. The process lets you save drafts, so if you're going through the application process, excuse me, and you need to stop to go get data or more information, you can come back to the application and work on it later. There's supporting documents that Savat put out in the original email that are also, you can look up as part of the, that's attached to the application. So if you need to refer to something. And then of course the site that was sent out, FSTICert.org. Next slide. So here's where you would register or log in if you've already registered. That's kind of our homepage for that. Next. It's a simple process. Registration's pretty basic. This is where you would pick where you'd pick that you're an applicant, not a vendor. Next. The whole idea of the application was to make it simple. We didn't want to make it complicated for anyone. We wanted to make it easy and something that you would easily commit to. So like I said, it's you pick which vendor. If you're a vendor or sub-grant, you're obviously the grantees or the applicants for the grant equipment. When you do that, when you register, you'll get an email from the system saying, thank you for registering. Now go in and set your password. We don't see your passwords, but you go in and set your password, and then it'll take you to the home page, and you'll follow the links for that. Next slide. So here's where you log in. Simple login process. If you forgot your password, let us know. Continue on, Gustavo. So the subaward applicant. Next slide. This is where when you log in, you'll see this page. The green button up there is where you would start your application. If you need to refer to documents, there's a link there. Next. Like I keep mentioning, there's a supporting documents. Next. If you need to contact us, send the message. They come to me direct, and I'll answer them as quickly as possible. This is where you start your application. The starting page should look familiar. It's the page that was sent out in the original email. And then go to start your application. Go ahead. You have to read through the terms and conditions, and you have to use the blue button that you agree to these terms and conditions before it'll let you go on. If you need to save the draft, there's a save draft button. Next. Pretty simple process to fill out that information. They want the program name, your sponsoring agency, your UL for your website, the address, basic information, program manager information as well. Next. And this is what it looks like. And like I keep saying, there's a draft button, so you can save it and move on if you needed to get more information. Next. It's real critical that we get the survey information so that we can provide that to Cal OES and Cal volunteers. It's not a big deal, but we really would appreciate if you take the time to give the best answers you have. So it's pretty simple. How is your funding? What is your annual budget if you have one? Hopefully you do. And where is it from, basically? A little description of your program. And this is real critical. How many engagements do you plan to make this sub-award period up until December 31st of 2020? It's real critical that you make your best estimate, because that will decide the amount of money that you'll get for equipment. And we'll get to that. Have you deployed CERT volunteers? Like I said, you can save it, but this is what happens when you put, the example is 500 engagements. Now this program would have $10,000 in their account with us to buy equipment. So I hope that makes sense. Continue. And then where do you want the equipment to go? You know, does it go to, you know, what's the delivery address for the program? So when we do order the equipment, it's going to be shipped directly to you folks. So we need to know where it goes. Next. We give you an opportunity to review the information, and you can change it. You can, like I said, there's an edit button. Next. And then you have to hit the blue square down there that you've actually looked at it, that you agree with it, you didn't make any more edits. And like I said, you can always save the draft and move and come back later if you need to. Next. And then you can either save it or you can submit. When you submit it, it's going to lock the application. And the reason that we do that is because we have to figure out the quantities of equipment to order based on the numbers that you're giving us, what the programs are giving us. And that's the only way we could do that. Otherwise, we'd be chasing numbers every day. But if you have an issue with your application, you either underestimated what you think that engagements or overestimated. But if there's a correction that you need to make, then just email me and we'll open it for a particular, we'll try to open it for a particular applicant. That way we have some control over the equipment orders. Next. And then you'll get this, it'll give you a number, a tracking number where you can keep track of your application. And then, like I said, once the bids are in, the bids are going out, they're going to close on September 4th. We're giving the vendors 10 working days to submit their bids, and then we'll award the equipment bids to the different vendors, depending on what they're bidding on. So once that gets completed, then you'll get an email letting you know what equipment that you can go in and request. So there'll be a page for you to go in and pick through the list. There'll be a pick list of equipment based on the price and based on your budget item, and then you can be able to order it. So that's kind of how that's going to work. Next. And this is just a quick slide on what the vendors go through. You can go ahead and go through that, Gustavo, and it's the same thing. Go ahead and go through it. But I wanted you to be aware of why there's that original choice between an applicant and a bid. So a couple quick things to wrap this section up. Everyone that registers will be sent field operation guides. I don't know if you can see that, but I can't take credit, but they're wonderful, wonderful little books. We're going to send these to everyone that's registered for your programs based on the number of folks you have registered on there, on your size of your program. Those will be drop shipped to you based on the information you give to us, and we'll get that out to you as soon as we can. And that's all I have on this section. Thank you.
I'd like to just take 5 minutes. I want to cut in line and kind of go over what engagements look like, because that's going to give people a better idea as they're looking at merit and tracking. Because right now they're thinking, oh, we need to think about engagements. Well, what is an engagement? So I'm going to share my screen and go over really quickly some of the guidance. So on my screen is kind of our original guidance document for engagements. Engagements basically means a touch point, a meaningful touch point with someone in California regarding preparedness, disaster preparedness. And we all know that there are a variety of different touch points, right? The highest touch point, which we call tier 1, is going to be getting people to take training like LISTOs, 8 hours worth of training, or like CERT, 20 hours worth of training. You're basically converting someone to be a huge asset and be a preparedness champion and be self-sufficient during disasters. So these are people who have bought in, understand the importance, and are ready to go. However, we all know that as program managers for the CERT program and LISTOs program, you have tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people in your jurisdiction, but you're only going to be able to fill 2 or 3 classes per year, right? So you're training something% of your population. And that's because the appetite to take 20 hours of training, 8 hours of training is not going to be there. We're not going to be able to train 1 million people in CERT and LISTOs in a 1-year period. I don't think 1 million people have been trained in CERT over 36 years. So that's tier 1, and that's the best outcome, but we know that that's not realistic in terms of our overall goal. Tier 2 is going to be people that you are able to engage with a presentation. So for about an hour long, we go to a church and talk about preparedness, and you talk about this, almost like the unit 1 of LISTOs and CERT. If you go to a business and they invite you in and talk to their employees about preparedness, that's a tier 1. If you have a webinar and talk about preparedness and say, hey, we're going to talk a little bit about disaster preparedness. And you're really just introducing the topics, or you're going over like how to put together a kit or how to sign up for an alert system. So you're training on a small chunk of information, not really giving them 20 hours of the training. That's what we call a tier 2 engagement. Tier 3 is where most engagements will happen within our grantees. That's going to be your quick hit. So if you have a booth at a preparedness fair and someone stops by your booth and you hand them a pamphlet and say, hey, this pamphlet's going to tell you where to go for more information about the CERT training or more information about preparedness. If you are helping out in a food pantry and you are handing out bags and you give them a pamphlet and you talk a little bit about preparedness. If you run a business, let's say you run a daycare and parents are coming by to pick up their kids and you stop them and tell them about, hey, do you know about disaster preparedness? Have you been to the county website? Have you been to the Lisa's California website? That's a tier 3 engagement. So these are really quick impressions of what disaster preparedness is to kind of get people to start thinking about it. You'll start getting some of those people to convert and take more training, but then some of those people, they're not going to do anything until they get touched again, until they see it again at a booth. But we want to make sure to give people a lot of different impressions so that they can finally cross over and take CERT training and take LISO's training or go and get a Go kit. So that's what a tier 3 engagement is. Tier 4 is not something that we're asking our grantees to do, but that is something that we're doing with the campaign. These are the billboards, these are the media buys. This is working with news outlets and media channels to promote the Lisa's California campaign, promote preparedness ideas and whatnot, so that people can start seeing more and more impressions of it. Because of COVID-19, a lot of what we were looking forward to for Tier 1, Tier 2, and Tier 3 is no longer viable. And that's because in many jurisdictions, you're not allowed to have public gatherings, right? It's discouraged, and a lot of them are still unsafe. You're in a hot zone. And even if it was safe, because of COVID-19, a lot of people will not show up. So you're working twice as hard to have an event for half the people showing up. So what we did was we expanded engagements to also include digital engagements, things you can do via the internet, via webinars, via telephone, via YouTube, via Facebook, via Twitter. So if you are still able to get impressions and connect with people using digital platforms, those will count as engagements. And that's going to actually be a lot easier because you can reach a lot of people via webinar. Like today, we have 41 people on the webinar. If you had a webinar and had 41 people show up, that's a quick hit in getting 41 engagements, as opposed to having to plan an in-person activity where you might get 41 people to show up, but it's a whole day event where you have to have multiple people. Plus, the participants are now investing a lot more time because they have to come and show up in person. Digital engagements will allow you to hit people who are, or connect with people who are going to be a little more shy or still not sure what preparedness is and they don't want to overcommit, right? It's almost like shopping. There's a lot of stuff that you're like, hey, I'll go to Amazon and check out this thing before I think about buying. And a lot of people are hesitant back in the old days to go into a store because they feel like, hey, if I go in a store and the salesperson sees me touching this device, they're going to try to come and sell me on this. And I don't want that to happen until I'm ready to go. So I'm not going to go to the store and then never try to buy something. But now with online shopping, people are able to go and check out things online, look at reviews without ever having any pressure to buy until they're ready. And digital engagements are almost the same thing because you can send a tweet out to all your followers on Twitter, right? You might have 300 followers on Twitter, your friends and family and people you work with, because they know you from something else. But if you're able to say, hey, the fire season's around the corner, please visit the lisoscalifornia.org website to learn more about how to be prepared for fire season. By doing that, that tweet now counts as engagement. What we need to do, though, is we need to track the interaction. So if people retweet that, then we say, okay, great, they retweeted, which means they absorbed the information, they liked it, and they retweeted it, so that will count that as engagement. So what we have is we have a guidance document, and I believe I also included this guidance document with the email that I sent, and I'll send it again with the recording for this webinar. This is going to go over how to use digital platforms for engagement. And so on Facebook, what is the minimum requirements to have Facebook count, and what do you count? What do you do for Twitter, TikTok, email campaigns with newsletters, app-based? We have our text campaign. We're doing webinar trainings with the CERT program. You can do a webinar training. You can do a YouTube video. So if you do a YouTube video and show a preparedness lesson, you can count the views on a YouTube channel or YouTube video as engagements. So if you already have a built-in network within one of your social media channels, it's going to be very easy for you. You know how many people you can reach, and you know that you already have a built-in base. If you don't already have that, it's going to take you a little time to get up to that. But within your organization, you might have someone who does social media that you can reach out to and say, hey, you're doing social media for our agency. Can you also do it for this campaign? Because if you send this tweet out or put a Facebook post and we get this many likes or this many retweets, each like and each retweet is now worth $20 worth of supplies and equipment for our program. And that's the key thing, right? This opportunity allows you to earn per engagement $20 in value for CERT equipment and supplies for your program without having to go through a regular grant process. You fill out the application online, and as long as you're an approved CERT program in the state of California, you're eligible for this opportunity. Once you complete your activities and you go on to the Merit platform and capture your engagement, and you meet your requirements, then you'll be sent your items. So it's as simple as that. You have really no other reporting requirements. There's really no contracts you have to sign, no higher approval besides you as a program manager, or you can send it to your sponsoring agency if you want. But understand that we are not asking for you to go and do things in person. Think about how you can engage people via these kind of means. At the very end of today's webinar, we have Carolyn from Ward Circle who's going to talk a little bit about the Social Bridging Project. And we had a webinar yesterday, which we'll send a link to. So if you have CERT volunteers helping to make phone calls within the Social Bridging Project, each disaster ready call that they're able to make is worth $20 to your program. So if you have a couple of CERT volunteers doing it every single weekend, you can earn hundreds and thousands of dollars for your program with a system that's already been created. Your volunteers just need to sign up, take the training, and then sign up for shifts and make phone calls, and they can do that, right? There's, once again, YouTube videos that you can make, or you don't have to make your own YouTube video. You can borrow a YouTube video from someone else that's approved and say, yeah, this meets the requirements. Put it on your YouTube channel so you can count the clicks for yourself and count them for your program. Because the idea is that we're not looking for you to recreate training and preparedness. We're looking for you to spread this information to your network. And by spreading the information to your network, you're then being part of the program and earning supplies and equipment for your program. Okay, we'll cover more about this at the end of this webinar, answer any questions you will have. I just want to let you know that this is what engagements are. It's really touch points, meaningful touch points around disaster preparedness to share information that the Lisa's California Campaign has created, or share other information that's been created by the CERT program, Lisa's program, FEMA, other institutions around preparedness. Thank you.
Suva, sorry to interrupt, but we have a great question from Andre about a citizen preparedness group, and if it's not a registered CERT program, are they still available for and eligible for equipment and supplies? Can you just answer that quickly before we move on?
Yes. So by default, if you're a registered CERT program, you can be pretty much automatically approved, because the vetting is going to be you fill out the application correctly. If you're on the list of approved programs, you're good to go. There's no other vetting, right? Because we've already done the vetting to vet programs previously. If you have not been vetted to be on the FEMA website, and that's the vetting that we do, you can contact me, and I'll put my email in the chat, and I can give an exception. Because what we also want to do is for programs that didn't get approved back then but can be approved now, or your new CERT program that can be approved in the future. So let's say you want to start a new CERT program and you meet all the requirements. This opportunity is going to be huge for you to be able to earn the equipment and supplies needed to be able to run your CERT program, right? Fire pans are part of this opportunity. A CERT equipment trailer is part of this opportunity. CERT vests, CERT helmets, cribbing materials, extinguishers, those are all eligible items that you can request by getting engagements. Typically, I estimate between $5,000 to $10,000 worth of equipment to be able to get ready to start training in CERT, right? You divide 10,000 by 20, and that's what, 500 engagements that you have to get. You can do 500 engagements really, really quickly using digital means, and all of a sudden you now have the training equipment and supplies you need to get your CERT program started. If you have CERT volunteers who really have outdated vests and outdated helmets, just tell them, hey, sign up for the Social Bridging Project, right? You connect to 2 phone calls and you earn $40, and now you have a new helmet and vest. So you can incentivize your program to do that too. You can tell your volunteers they can earn their updated equipment and supplies, as well as earn for the program training equipment and supplies that they can use as well. So however you want to run it as a CERT program manager, however you want to incentivize your volunteers, you can do that. Once again, it's $20 per engagement, which is a really, really good return. If you are not a registered program, just go ahead and email me. I'll work with you to vet you. I'm not going to say, hey, anyone can do it, right? This is designed for CERT programs and new CERT programs, or people doing CERT activities. It's not necessarily designed for people not involved in CERT. So as long as there's a nexus in CERT, we can look at trying to get you approved.
Perfect. Thank you, Suva, very much. Now we're going to turn things over to our friends from Merit and Valley Vision, Jen Evans and Grace Kaufman.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jen. I'm over here. I am the customer success team here at Merit, and I just kind of wanted to say hi. I see a lot of people on this webinar that I recognize, and so for a lot of you, this will just be a review. For some of you, it'll be a little bit new, so I'll try and keep this pretty short. So I think that this went out recently to a lot of you, but I'll just go ahead and quickly go over kind of like what the onboarding plan looks like. So after you submit your grant application with FSTI, they're going to go ahead and let us, both Merit and Valley Vision, know that you've applied, so that we kind of have a heads up and we know that you're going to do the next steps. The next step to access this data tracking tool. This data tracking tool was something that Merit and the Listos California campaign came together to create, to provide a way for you to enter in records of these engagement activities that you're going to be doing to fulfill your grant. So the first step in accessing this data tracking tool is to register with Merit. So some of you have already done this, and some of you have already been linked to the data tracking tool. But the way that the data tracking tool was created pre-pandemic, pre-everything, was that grantees were only thought of as grantees, but not also as sub-grantees. So we'll have you re-register with Merit, and we'll have you kind of tag your organization name with a -FSTI, just to let us know, you know, you're a sub-grantee under FSTI, and that we can like fast track you onto the tool, meaning that you've already been onto the tool before. You probably don't need that much training. You just need the door to be opened for you. So you're going to go to that merits.com website, register. If it's your second one, second time you've registered with Merit, you're going to tag it with FSTI, and then you're going to connect with one of us, like one of our support team members here at Merit. There's a link here in this document here, but also if you go to merits.com and then use the little chat window in the bottom right hand corner and just say that you want to connect with one of us, we'll reach out to you right away. For those of you who are new, it'll take about 10 minutes on the phone, and you'll need internet access, and we'll just make sure that you have all of your questions answered and that you're able to fill out a survey. It's pretty straightforward. There's a lot of resources that we've provided for you. We do have a help center that's dedicated to the Listos California campaign. It has recorded webinar trainings for both administrators and for leaders. It allows you to go through the steps needed to edit a survey in case you entered something that may be wrong and you want to just go back and check. It shows you how to export reports and everything like that. Now, for any technical problems or questions that you have while you're entering in information about your surveys, you can reach out to Merit. We are the tech group. And then if you need guidance or you have questions about your engagements and what you should enter, what you shouldn't enter, then definitely reach out to Grace over at Valley Vision. And we've provided those email addresses at the top of that document as well. Now, we also want to make sure that we have support for you guys every single week. So Merit is going to host an office hours every Wednesday in September from 3:30 p.m. to 4:30 p.m. Now, it's not like something that you have to do. It's just something that if you are entering in your engagements and you had a question and your calendar's crazy, but you do want to just chime in, you can jump in anytime, get your questions answered, and then jump off. We just want to make sure that the door is open to you at least once a week for an entire hour and just provide the support that you need. And it looks like there might have been a couple of questions on the chat window. Let me just see if there's anything in here. I can definitely share my contact with you, Sharon, and then It looks like that was it. And hi, Sandra. It's really nice to see your name here too as well. Does anybody else have any questions about that? We wanted to try and keep this short and simple and just really smooth.
Jen, I have one quick comment. This
Sure.
is Suva.
Hi, Suva.
So I do want to emphasize that, hey, Jen, if you are a current grantee and you have an account set up to track your current engagements, you will be asked to create a sub-account. You can still use the same login, but you're going to create a sub-account that we will tag to FSTI. That way we can roll it up and see the total numbers. It also allows FSTI to log in as an admin and see your numbers as well and see when you met your engagements. Just to clarify, engagements are captured by activity or a bulk of activity. So if you're doing, let's say, the social media tweets for 2 weeks straight, you can capture that as one engagement and just put in your total numbers for the 2 weeks. But if you're doing like a webinar training and it's a one-off, then you will capture that as a separate activity. If you're doing videos, then you can capture the video as an activity, and you can either enter that activity every single month and put in the new numbers for each month, or just put the information in at the end of the year and show your total numbers for those engagements. If your volunteers participate in the social bridging project, we will be capturing that on our end and giving you guys credit. So we will have yet to decide if we will just send information to program managers weekly or bi-weekly, where they can enter it as an activity, or we will automatically capture it and add it to and credit your account, quote unquote, with FSTI, so that we'll let you know, hey, you have 200 engagements through social bridging, and we'll let FSTI know so that counts towards you reaching your goal.
I did want to also let you know that Grace does do some reports every Friday. So if you are entering in engagements, she does take a look at those every week. And I'm not sure, Grace, are you online? Did you want to give some guidance there as well?
Yeah, that's correct. And so I do a weekly report that goes to OES. And so if you, depending on when you input data, it'll be reflected the following Friday.
Does anybody else have any other questions that I can answer? Grace, did you want to ask Mary's question about social bridging? Is it completed calls or attempted calls?
Completed.
Completed. Okay, great, thanks.
Great, well, thank you very much, Jen and Grace. So now we're gonna open the mic for anyone who has any questions for Brian and Subha. So please go right ahead.
Subha, this is Mary. What happens if we say we're willing to do 300 engagements, and by December 31st, we only get to 200?
So you will basically get your prorated amount of supplies and equipment. So if you commit to 300, and that will get you $6,000 worth of value, and you select $6,000 worth of value, but you only get to 200, that means that you only get $400,000 worth of value, and that's going to be what's going to be said. So FSTI is going to work out whether or not they just give you a percentage or work with you on which of the items you are looking to purchase. Now, it is important to try to be as accurate as possible, just because FSTI is going to be committing and purchasing the items and having it ready, so that once December rolls around and you finish, they can send you the items, as opposed to waiting until you finish and ordering the items, because the grant ends this year. So be conservative if you can. It's a lot easier for you to meet your numbers in a month and say, hey, FSTI, I want to put in a new application because I already meet my numbers and I want to do more. And they say, great, we can order more supplies once we see that number. Or yes, we order a little bit extra and we can allocate that extra to you. But it's going to be easier to do it that way than for you to say, hey, we'll do 10,000 engagements. They order 10,000 worth and you only do 200 engagements. And now there's a huge surplus of equipment and supplies. If you have a question about, hey, what's realistic, you can reach out to me and we can talk. it's hard for me to say what's realistic per program without knowing what your bandwidth is to do different social media activities, or whether or not you have people in your organization that is adept at social media that can do it, or are we training you to do it, and then how much time do you have to invest in it, right? We know that people who can invest full-time in social media will be able to really, really quickly build up the user base and everything. But if all you can commit is an hour once per week, you're really not going to get much traction, because the thing about social media is that it's ongoing activity for you to build out that user base. Or you already have a current email list, right? If you have an email list, you can reach out to and say, hey, we put up a video, then you're just emailing people and having them go to your YouTube link and watch your video, and you can get engagements there. Or you say, hey, we're going to do a 15-minute presentation on preparedness, then you can send out a link and people can hop on. The best thing, the easiest thing is to find out if there's already webinars going on. So if you know that in your community, there's a webinar going on for community members talk about any topic, you can ask them and say, hey, do you mind if I go on for 5 minutes and talk about disaster preparedness? If you do that, you can count everybody on that webinar as an engagement. So if there's a webinar with 100 people that you can just tag onto and talk for 5 minutes, that's 100 people times $20 that you can earn by making that one phone call and connecting and going on and just talking really quickly about disaster preparedness, give them links to the listlesscalifornia.org website, and then ask the administrators to send you a screenshot or a list or just a number of the attendees, and that's pretty much it.
So this is Brian. I wanted to kind of go through some of the chat questions real quick for people that may have dialed in. We could do that. Barbara Anderson wrote a nice little chat here that the data collected on the surveys will be utilized for, really it's to understand the capacity of the CERT programs in California. It's not to be used to vet or assess your application for funding. So she wanted to make it clear that the survey has got nothing to do with the other piece. So just be aware of that. A question from Sandra, is there a minimum number of engagements required for this subgrant? These engagements were separate from those we made in the Listos grant, correct? That's correct, they're separate. There is no minimum, but the account is separate.
So Brian, I'm going to go through it.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll go through and answer a couple of other questions that I see here that could be directed to me. So for social bridging, it's going to be completed calls, not attempted calls. So the thing with social bridging is that there's a technology piece that will automatically dial people and will only connect the caller once someone on the other line is picked up. Then the caller will go through a script and introduce themselves, but if someone hangs up, you have not given them any information about preparedness, so that doesn't count. However, once that person says, oh yeah, tell me about preparedness, it could be a quick 2-minute conversation, 5-minute conversation, then that will count as a preparedness activity. Okay. This recording will be sent to all attendees as well. Well, it will be sent to my normal California CERT contact list. So if you're on this webinar, you got it somehow, whether directly from me or from someone else. If you didn't get it directly from me and you think you should be added to my list, which is for program managers and volunteer coordinators assisting with the program, let me know or have your program manager email me to add you to my email list. Maggie asked if the supplies are specific. Yes, when you sign up for this process, once you enter the number of engagements that you want to commit to, they translate that, multiply by $20, and basically gives you a budget. So you commit to 500 engagements, they could be a budget of $10,000. And then that next screen, you're going to be able to see the pick list of items, and then you can say, hey, I want 2 fire extinguishers. Then they'll tell you what the value of fire extinguishers are. Then they minus it from your bucket, your dollar amount, and then they'll tell you how much money remaining you have left to kind of pick the items. Then you can pick PPE, trailers, whatever you want. So you pick what you want. It's not a, hey, you're going to get this set amount and then you just get more of it. You decide what your program needs. If your program doesn't need anything except for fire extinguishers, you can order $10,000 worth of fire extinguishers if you want. It's a general list of CERT equipment, training, and supplies, and I will resend that list along with this recording in order for you to meet it. If you, and I believe that they, FSTI is offering, if you have a special request, FSTI may be able to work with you to be able to get your special request, and you can just reach out to them and say, hey, on your list, there's nothing I really want. Can you make this happen? And they might say yay or they might say nay. It really depends, right? it's dependent on what's eligible within the grant. So it still has to be something purchasable within the grant guidelines. And it also has to be something that they can purchase in time for this grant, as well as be able to go through the proper procurement process for it. Now you get asked if engagements can be retroactive. Unfortunately, it cannot. And here's the reason why engagements cannot be retroactive. The Leaseless California campaign is not about capturing what's going on in the state of California. It's not about saying, hey, what's happening in California? What CERT programs are you doing and getting credit for it? It's basically saying, hey, are you willing to fly the Leaseless California banner while you're doing your work? So people understand that them being reached out to, them being prepared, them being trained is part of a governor's effort. It's also an effort to encourage people to go above and beyond what they normally do. So CERT programs say, hey, we normally only do one preparedness activity per year. Now they have incentive to do more than one activity. And guess what? Now more than one activity's worth of people are being engaged in the community because of the Leaseless California campaign. So that's why, unfortunately, it can't be retroactive to it. And even for current grantees, we did try to ask. They said no, because it's really a audit issue and contract issue and everything. So once you sign up and you are approved, then all your numbers going forward can count toward your engagements. How do you count next door engagement? So yes, I don't think that in social media we have next door counted there yet, but that does not mean we don't want to count that. So Mary, if we can have a conversation offline and you can give me some ideas of what you do on Nextdoor, and we can say, yeah, that should be able to count. Here's the thing. Before COVID-19, none of these digital ways counted. We wanted it to be in person, right? And we were able to draft new guidance based on what kind of activities people proposed to us, and we were able to get sign off on it. We have to be able to say we can tangibly count the interaction because of the optics, right? If we say, hey, 1 million people were engaged, there's tons of reporters out there saying, well, how did you engage these people? Was it just a mail in the mailbox and no one read? So no, these are specific activities. So you want to kind of make sure that it's bulletproof and shows that not only did you push it out, because if you have 100,000 followers, that doesn't mean 100,000 people read everything you send, right? There's a lot of channels that I subscribe to on YouTube that I don't watch their videos. I subscribed a year ago. I just haven't deleted it yet. So you can't count your subscriptions or your list. What you can count is some kind of interaction that shows that they saw it and they did something, a like, a retweet. In Nextdoor, maybe it's a comment back on something you posted can be counted. Trish asked, for a disaster prep texting campaign, could we tweet the 5 steps out over 5 days, one each day, and count engagement each day? Yes, so you can retweet multiple times and count the engagements for each of your tweets as long as you count the engagement properly. We do want to be careful about duplicates, and it was a lot easier to read out the duplicates with in-person activities. For example, if you go to the same senior center with the same 300 people and talk with them week after week, you can't count 300 people every single week, right? We're trying to count 1 million unique Californians, not 1 million impressions. However, with digital, you really can't count. There's really no way for us to feasibly ask people to track to make sure there's no duplicates. So I think for social media, as long as you're not focusing your tweets to the same audience over and over again, your YouTube channels obviously is not the same people, then it's fine, right? We're not going to say work as hard as you can to make sure there's no duplicates, but do your due diligence. If you know it's a duplicate audience, don't count that again. But if you can't tell, then that's fine for us to count it, right? The nice thing about it is we're so close to the 1 million mark, and once we go over 1 million, then it really doesn't matter because the goal is 1 million. So we just do your due diligence on that. If you have any questions, ask us. The social media guidance is being updated as we continue to have social media engagements. Once we approve some Nextdoor engagements, we'll add that there as well. One more thing I want to offer, because I think that this will make it a lot easier for people. If you want to create a YouTube video, we actually have a nice 2-minute intro for the Leaseless California campaign that you can add a 2-minute video, 5-minute video afterwards, showing one of the 5 steps or all 5 steps of preparedness from the disaster guide. And you want to record that and send that to me. We'll upload it to our YouTube channel and give you the link. So all you got to do is share the link and people can go on there. And if it's your video, you can count all the engagements on that. So that way, if you don't want to maintain a YouTube channel and you want to send it, and then we will, and the nice thing about being on a single YouTube channel is you'll randomly get people watching your video that you didn't promote because people are going to a regular channel, right? So you'll get some free ancillary engagements from that. and also you can promote it as well. So if you want to do that and send me a ready-to-go video, I can't edit the video, but if it's ready to go, I can upload it, and then we can include in the information description at least California information and make it applicable, then you're fine. I will send a link to the intro 2-minute video to give me an idea of what that looks like, which is a great lead in to kind of the training that you want to provide, make it a total of 5 minutes, and then just get some eyeballs on it, and that can count as engagements, right? If you leverage your CERT volunteers and tell your CERT volunteers, hey, everybody needs to get 5 friends and family to watch this video. You just tell them, you have 30 volunteers, you tell them, look, don't come back to me unless you get 5 people to watch this video. Guess what? That's 150 people that watch that video. That's $3,000 that you can earn from your program just by having your volunteers kind of share a link with their friends and family and tell people, hey, get prepared, watch this video. So there are a lot of ways to go about it. Nothing is free, nothing's effortless, but there are things that you can do, especially during COVID-19 when people have a lot of free time on their hands. People are naturally on YouTube already, naturally on Facebook and Twitter, just to make sure they get eyeballs on preparedness specific stuff. So going back down, if people register for a class at Eventbrite, how do I show attendance counts as engagements? Great. So if you do a webinar training, all you gotta do is screenshot the participant list, and we can see like 72 people on. You can count that as engagement. Most webinar services will also send an email recap with a link to the recording, plus a breakdown of the participants, and you can go ahead and use that list as well too. What you do is just screenshot it really quick, and then you can just send it to FSTI at the end of the grant cycle, and just so they have it for audit purposes. When you go on to do your engagements on Merit, it's not going to ask you to upload that list. So just have it ready in case we say, hey, you showed 10,000 engagements and many of them by webinar. Do you have the screenshots for the people on your webinar? For YouTube, for Twitter, for Facebook, it's a lot easier, right? Those likes are there. You can screenshot it whenever you want and get that information. And same thing for YouTube channels. You can go to the YouTube channel anytime you want and see how many people watched your video and track the engagements there. I will put Brian's email in the chat box so I'm done answering questions, as well as make sure you guys have his contact information with the follow-up email. Is there a different amount for longer engagements? No, unfortunately, an engagement is an engagement. And I also want to be clear about this. If you have let's say you're doing a webinar series, 4 webinars for the same topic, the same group of people, you only count one set of engagements. So you can't count the same people 4 times. So you break up your training into smaller chunks. That doesn't give you more engagements. The idea is to try to engage different people. So when you knowingly know that it's the same people, please don't duplicate it, right? But if you don't knowingly know, then that's fine, right? Because we're not going to ask you to do extra work to try to weed out the duplicates or ask people for their names or unique identifiers and whatnot. For Eventbrite, you can't just count the people who registered, because you can register for something on Eventbrite but never show up to the training. You have to count people who actually showed up on the webinar. They don't have to be there the entire time, right? Just take a screenshot of the maximum count or look at that recap, which has the maximum count of everybody that was on that webinar. Really quickly, going back to the disaster ready guide. So the disaster ready guide has many components. One of the components is the 5 steps of disaster readiness and whatnot. So when you do a quick social media, a quick video, a tweet or something, you can kind of isolate one of the topics to train and make it really short, 5 minutes as opposed to 30 minutes. What you would do, though, is you would refer people to the website for more information, and that's going to allow it to be complete as an engagement, because while you're sharing just how to use an extinguisher, you're referring them to a website to get more information so they can learn how to fill the kit, they can learn how to sign up for alerts and whatnot. If you have an alert system in your county, this is the best thing you can do. Go to your county emergency management and say, hey, we want to help you promote your alert system and get people to sign up, right? Everybody who signs up for that alert system can count as an engagement. So partner with your county. What you do when you partner with your county and say, hey, we're going to start partnering with you right now. Today is the date. Can you track the number of people who sign up for your alerts after this date, right? Then you can count all those engagements. You can say, hey, put up the Lisos California logo on your website and whatnot. Refer people to that link. Now you're bringing the county into your efforts for engagement, and because you're bringing them in, they can count too. You can give me a call to discuss this further if anyone has any questions about how to kind of do that properly. What evidence do I need if I do a presentation to my college students? Yes, if you are doing a presentation to college students, if you have a sign-in sheet, that works. We are not asking for sign-in sheets unless it is a CERT training or LISOS training. So if you're doing just a presentation, just document it, right? Have a printed agenda and just write on it the number of people that were on it and sign it and keep that for your audit records. And that's going to be enough. We're kind of doing a big honor system with this. When you're trying to do 1 million engagements and trying to do sign-in sheets, we found that to be impossible. We also found that people were hesitant to sign in. Even if you gave them a flashlight for stopping by a booth and putting their name down on a list, people don't want to do it because they are like, well, what are you going to use my name for? Even if they have no address to anything else. So we eliminated that requirement except for certain LISOS training. So if you have an event, just have an agenda and write down the thing and just sign it. Gene, if you go on the registration site, it tells you what the estimated dollar is. Right now, we still don't know exactly what the dollar is because we're still getting bids for the equipment. But I think, Brian, are you able to provide me with an estimate? If you can update the equipment list with an estimate dollar amount or value per item, so that way programs can kind of get an idea and start planning for what they want. I think it'll be a great incentive too, because if they're like, hey, I want $10,000 worth of stuff, then I better commit to $10,000 worth of engagements, right? They can do it in reverse as opposed to how many they can think. Because people work harder to earn more stuff, I think. So we'll try to get that to you, Gene, and everybody else.
Yeah, we won't have that until after the bids are done on next Friday, and they don't have access to that piece of the application yet because we're going to build in the prices. But they have the general list that you sent out, the draft list. I can update that if they want, but we won't have those until after next week.
Okay. Well, you can quickly Google and just see 2 or 3 prices. You know, if you hit Google on an item and you hit the shopping link, it'll tell you the local vendors and what they're selling items for. And you can kind of see the gist of what the value is for an item. We apologize that that's not ready at this time. Sharon asked, does Nextdoor show how many people in your network? When you log on to the Nextdoor app, it actually tells you all of your neighbors within a neighborhood that sign up for Nextdoor. So you can kind of see who's in there. When you make a post, then everyone, when they log into the Nextdoor within the neighborhood, they'll see your post too. So if you share a flyer about preparedness, then that works. One other way to capture engagements is if you have a website and you upload the LISOS California Disaster Ready Guide. So a guide that's ready to go, all you gotta do is upload it and tell people to go to your website to download it. You can count the number of downloads as engagements. So you get with your IT person, you set up Google Analytics to be able to capture the number of downloads to it. Then you can just promote that link and say, hey, download the LISOS California Disaster Ready Guide. Count the number of downloads. You get 200 downloads, that's worth $4,000 to you. Any other questions? So we do have Carolyn from Ward Circle here with the Social Bridging Project. If anyone has any questions about social bridging, I'll let Carolyn talk for a couple minutes and give you an overview of the number of CERT programs that are already involved with social bridging, the process for signing volunteers up. So if you're not involved, she can talk a little bit about what the ramp up is. So if you commit to doing that, the process for signing the volunteers, how to get shifts and whatnot. So Carolyn, if you can talk for a few minutes about that.
Certainly. Hello, everybody. Katie Meyer is here also to answer any questions about volunteers. So the Social Bridging Project, we're doing outreach to vulnerable communities by phone for disaster readiness calls and wellness calls. And this process is pretty simple. Katie has it pretty well automated. So once you sign up and sign a non-disclosure form, you're put right into the training schedule. You can choose when you'd like to be trained, when we have scheduled, and then become a bridger. All bridgers are supported during their shifts. The training's great, very comprehensive. You are trained to use the county resource guides and the disaster readiness guides that are prepared for each county. They're thoroughly vetted for efficacy and accuracy. And those are going to be available on a Slack channel. So you'll be trained to use the Slack channel, trained to use ThruTalk, to make your calls. And while you're making your calls, you'll be completely supported by the social bridging team, which will be right there on Slack. Should you have any questions, any problems, they're right there to answer any of your questions. You're working alone, but you're not working alone completely, because you're working at home, but not alone, because you have a whole team supporting you. Katie, do you want to talk a little bit about the onboarding process?
Yes, of course. It's pretty simple. So the first step is you're going to sign up using the tiny URL form. So I just put that in the chat. So once you sign up that form, that puts you in our database. So we're going to send you a non-disclosure agreement because we are calling voters and accessing the voter file and using people's personal information. We do ask that everyone making calls signs a non-disclosure agreement, basically saying they're not going to share voter information with anyone. So once you do for that, you'll get an email from DocuSign where you can sign that non-disclosure agreement electronically. Once you sign the NDA, we are going to send you an email with all the training dates. There are 3 different trainings that you will need to be able to be eligible for all different calls. The first one is going to be a welcome training, going over basically the tools that we're using. We use something called ThroughTalk, which is an automatic dialer system that basically feeds you calls. So we'll go over how to use that, how to use Slack, which is how we communicate. And then also we have 2 different script trainings. So we have wellness calls, which are checking in with older adults to make sure they have all the resources that they need during COVID. And then we have disaster readiness calls, which is making sure people are prepared in the event of a natural disaster. So for each of those types of calls, we have a script training. So once you do both the welcome training and then the script training, you'll be eligible to make that type of calls. And then once you are all signed up, all done with your training, you will get an invitation to our Slack workspace where you can answer questions during your shift. That's where you'll find all the details, what our schedule is, as well as even we have office hours to be able to support you. During our training, we go through all the details of here's how you use Slack and break it down. And we're also super open to questions. I know multiple of us on the team are always open to do one-on-one Zoom meetings with people who are struggling with the technology. And once you get the hang of it, it's pretty easy. So please encourage your members to sign up. I put the link in the chat, and please, we have a template email that we can send to you if you want to send out to your programs, and encourage more people to do this really important work, because especially you all know it's wildfire season right now. We want to make sure everyone is ready in the event that there is a fire in their area. Thank you.
Oh, and I should say you'll be calling from scripts. So it's really an easy process. The script takes you right through the whole call. And one of the things I'm going to say for those of you who do join us, we love it when people write notes at the end of the shift and let us know about memorable calls. A lot of our bridgers are finding this is a wonderful experience, and they are talking with people that they're really enjoying. So if you would like to join us, we'd love to hear those stories also.
Yeah, so I did ask for Carolyn and Katie to share their emails on the chat box. And once again, I'll be sending a recap of the webinar we held yesterday that gave a great overview of the social bridging project, the process for training, actually shows the training process, and they even did a mock call so you can see exactly what that interaction looks like. And do some troubleshooting. We're committing to doing regular webinars to give updates to programs. Currently, roughly 150 CERT programs in California have volunteers that have signed up for this project. And we're going to start sending information to each program about the specific volunteers that they have and kind of their activity within social bridging. we're going to start sending some information about leaderboards, so which programs have the most callers and whatnot. So we'll kind of gamify a little bit. We're doing special edition challenge coins for the volunteers that participate in the Social Bridging Project. And for those of you who missed the call yesterday, the biggest thing about the Social Bridging Project is it is a CERT and AmeriCorps dominant activity, which means that for the most part, CERT programs and AmeriCorps programs in California will get credit in the governor's eyes for reaching out to these Californians for wellness calls as well as disaster readiness calls. 22 counties have signed up to be part of this project. That means callers will be reaching out to one of these 22 counties when they do their shifts. We have to kind of get approval from all the counties, so not all counties have signed up, but we are actively trying to work to add more counties to that list. But your county does not have to be on the list for you to participate, because your calls will be connected to people all over the state. So anyone can participate as long as they're affiliated with a CERT program, and we have eliminated the requirements for background checks for social bridging. So once again, social bridging is an easy way for you to be able to get engagement and also give your CERT volunteers something they can do and talk about disaster readiness, which is something they should be passionate about. Uploading the Disaster Ready Guide from Lisa's California to your website and counting the number of downloads to that is another easy thing. Recording a quick YouTube video using your iPhone, talking about some of the training from Disaster Ready Guide or from CERT, and including the proper identifiers to that video, sending me the link, I can upload it, you can share it. That's an easy way for you to get engagement. If you're already having a robust social media following, you can use that and leverage that for social media engagement. Having webinars that you can join or host yourself will count as training engagement. Having people go and do the hybrid CERT training, that counts as engagement. If you have people do the FEMA, you are the help arrives class, or some of their entry-level online training, that counts as well. Also, the FEMA IS-317, their intro to CERT class, that will also count as an engagement. So if you have a huge following in your community and tell people, hey, before you're ready for CERT training, take this training. It's updated, it's 2 hours long only. You can have people take it, send your copies of the certificate, and you can count those as engagements as well too. So there's a lot of different ways to do engagements over the next couple of months to earn this equipment and supplies. There's about $3 million worth of equipment and supplies that CERT programs in California can earn. So there's a lot of options out there. Hopefully programs will take it up and we'll be able to utilize that, because the key thing is we have to spend down all the money. Otherwise, we can't ask for more money next year, right? If you say, hey, we have $3 million left next year, they're like, well, you didn't spend it all, so guess what? These other people, they really need the money. It just goes back to the same thing as that lemonade stand, right? If your mom knows you only need $1 to run your lemonade stand, they're not giving you $2 next year. It's why no government agency wants a surplus budget. Everyone's spending their grant funds at the end of the year, because if they don't, they may not get it next year. Same concept here.
Great. If anyone has any more questions, then we're going to go ahead and move to closing remarks with Brian. Any questions anymore? Anyone? Okay, go ahead, Brian. Take it away.
All right, well, thank you. I appreciate everybody getting on at the noon hour. I know it's not the greatest time of day for some people, but we're trying to reach as many folks as we can. I thought that'd be a good time. But as Sival said, reach out to us. To any of us presenters that were here today. My job at FSTI is to support you. So that's my only job right now, is retired annuitant. So please reach out to me, reach out to any of the presenters that you have any questions, and we'll see what we could do. If I don't have the answer, I'll definitely run it down for you. That's all I have, but thank you for your time.
Thank you all. Have a good afternoon.